Hello and welcome to My Psychotherapy Career, a podcast where we explore the different therapeutic settings our members work in and how they came into their career. I'm Jenna Rashid, the Digital Engagement Officer at UKCP. Our host, Helen Willingham, is the Head of Content and Engagement at UKCP, overseeing all our communications to members and the public, as well as our policy and research work. In this episode, Helen speaks to UKCP's psychotherapist, John Paul Davies. John Paul is a writer, contributing to blogs and articles. He is also a published author. His book, Finding a Balanced Connection, seeks to offer self-help advice to individuals seeking to build well-being from within. Helen seeks to find out what led John Paul to set up his private practice after a career as a lawyer.
So thank you, John Paul, for joining today. My first question is, why did you decide to set up in private practice?
My previous career was as a solicitor. So I was working within a big organisation, a big city law firm at the time. And I think one of the reasons for going into therapy and training as a psychotherapist was, of course, an interest in the subject. But there was also the thing about working for myself and being much more in control of what I did on a day-to-day basis. So what led me into the training as well as I was in therapy. So obviously I'd had experience for a number of years of somebody in private practice, so I could see what it was like. I'd had a child as well. So looking for a career and a way of working, I suppose, that fitted with a family life too, better than working within a large law firm. So I mean, it's since having trained and being around more in the therapy world that actually I can see in terms of where people are employed, all those different opportunities. But I think I came into it with private practice in mind.
And was there something specific? I know you mentioned about kind of work-life balance, but was there anything specific that appealed to you about private practice in itself?
Well, it would be the flexibility. It would be choosing hours. I know that in terms of, from my point of view, I'm a primary income earner in the house. So seeing a particular number of clients was necessary. And that, if you're looking at transitioning into going into private practice, I think it's really something to hold in mind, particularly coming from something which I did, say, law. There is an income level and private health insurance and all those things. So I wanted something that was flexible and also, particularly or mainly doing something that I loved and enjoyed and was interested in. And private practice gave me that model. I mean, there are things, of course, that come with setting up a business, running all those things yourself, getting clients. If you have two clients at the beginning and one leaves, there can be dealing with the anxiety of those kinds of situations, which you wouldn't have necessarily working in a big law firm as a lawyer. But I think it was the model that fitted most for me with the lifestyle that I imagined I wanted.
And you made a point there about setting up and getting clients. How did you begin that process and how did you start to get clients to your practice?
Well, I started my private practice in my third year at CCPE where I trained. We were allowed to do that then, even though we hadn't qualified. So it's a 4-year course. And in the third year, I was able to do that. I set it up with a colleague, actually, which was nice, being able to do the website and things together and think about the marketing and things together. So initially, the college restricted the amount that you were able to charge an hour. What I was able to do, or I had to charge a sort of low rate, completely understandably, because you're still training, a low rate for the therapy. So I started doing a Google AdWords campaign, so the sponsored ads on Google. So somebody Googled low cost therapist, then my name and the name of this other person would come up. So a number of clients came through that. And then also at CCPE, where I trained, they also have a counselling service there. So tutors who assessed people when they came in would refer anybody who wanted low-cost therapy.
You mentioned making use of Google AdWords and kind of reaching people in different ways. And another way that you do that is now you're an author and you've done quite a lot of media work as well with newspapers and further podcasts as well. And what prompted you to get into that side of things?
Well, I wrote a book, self-published it in 2019, but of course you want people to read it and as many people as possible to read it. So I employed at that point just for a 2-week campaign, a PR company, because I had very little expertise in social media actually at that time in selling the book. So they set up interviews on radio and also approached a few journalists and asked them whether they needed somebody to contribute to an article. And there were a number of things that came out of that. And I sort of continued with those journalist contacts afterwards. So Healthy for Men, for example, I got an introduction through that PR company. And then the journalist that I spoke to came back every time they had to write an article, and has done ever since, on a sort of psychological or well-being matter. So that's continued, which has been great. And I love it. It's a great complement to the client work, I find. You know, it's another way to reach people. It's a different way to reach people, and lots of people. Perhaps some people that wouldn't be able to come into therapy or wouldn't come into therapy. It's a way of reaching them, as I say, through contributing to articles and people reading that. And also doing podcasts is another great thing I find, which I really enjoy.
Have you got any advice that you would give to someone who is thinking about exploring more media work?
Yes, I would say, there's the practical ways of doing it, getting into contact with journalists at UKCP, have spokespeople. I mean, advice-wise, I would say, people generally can want things quite quickly, so it will need to fit with whatever else is happening in your life. And of course, you need to enjoy it. I initially, perhaps I didn't as much, in some ways I was doing it to promote the book at the beginning, but when you sort of get into it and then realize the impact it can have, if I look at the podcast that I did with Guardian journalist Annalisa, that was via UKCP. She does a sort of agony aunt column in the Guardian, and she gets via UKCP, psychotherapists to provide input on that. And through that, she asked me to go on to one of the podcasts and do that. And it did really well. Her podcast series, covered various different subjects. And through that came new clients who'd heard the podcast. I would really suggest that people try and see what it feels like.
That's great advice, John Paul. And I think if you've got that want to do it, then there are those different opportunities available. And I guess once you're in, then more and more opportunities become available to do different things. And it might be that actually writing a comment or quote for a print article isn't quite the right thing, but working on a podcast might be.
There are so many people, so many different websites, newspapers, magazines, podcasts now. And I think in terms of emotional well-being, psychological issues, mental health is so high up the agenda for people that there are lots of opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of people probably that want to do it, but there are lots of opportunities. And as I say, it can make a really significant difference. Lots of younger clients who are on Instagram scrolling through, and some of the things that they see and read, are very helpful. And that is how they will connect with somebody and potentially find a therapist. So again, there are people that I know that don't even have a website and have very successful practices and, would never want to do the media stuff. But personally, I think it is a very helpful way. Everything feeds into each other, I find, and it makes, as I say, for a very balanced day for me in terms of working as a therapist.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about setting up in private practice?
I would say there is the practical issue of, transitioning from training into starting a practice, which means usually a drop in income for somebody, particularly if they are the primary income earner, for example. So thinking about that as soon as possible, how that's going to be possible practically. I would say in terms of people around and local therapists, there might be a tendency to think of other therapists as competition, but I would very much say that treating other therapists, as a community is a very helpful thing to do. Of course, if somebody's looking for a therapist and there's you or another person's website comes up, they're choosing one or the other. But, I meet some local therapists here monthly. It's incredibly helpful to meet with them. Being a psychotherapist in private practice, being able to talk to other therapists about what that brings up, looking at the coronavirus, switching over to Zoom, those things. It's a very particular way of working and being, which can be really understood by other therapists. So I think it's really important to have that community. And if there isn't one locally, I would suggest, contacting other people who work in private practice and talk to them about what it's like and what their journey's like. There's also the referrals, that practical side of things. So if the particular client chooses to go to the other person, for example, if their partner wants to come and see a therapist or their child, and there's a conflict potentially there, then we can all refer to each other. In Cobham High Street, there are 8 therapists, and since I've been working, and that's 10 years, no one has stopped.
And how did you get involved locally? Was that a kind of established group that you managed to find, or how was
yes,
that
there
set
is.
up?
There's a group locally. I'm in Cobham in Surrey, and there's the Surrey Counsellors and Psychotherapists Initiative, which originally, I think, about 30 counsellors and therapists, but it's now gone up to 50. They're reorganising it at the moment, but they meet every month, and they do CPD. So somebody does some training within the group for CPD, and then also, of course, we have coffee with people and speak to them about how things are going. And then out of that, I also see a small number of people who are literally work 100 yards from me. And I would say, if that isn't something that's in your area, that's something at any stage, even if you're training, that you could think about putting together. My experience, as different as therapists can be, there are a lovely group of people to be around, and all, really supportive, I found.
One of the questions that we ask everybody in this podcast is, what does being a UKCP member mean to you?
Well, I like the fact that there is this sort of central body who has a code of ethics. So I like the fact there is this central kind of organising body that sets down, I guess, guidance, standards, those kind of things. That I'm glad there is that body within the profession, considering, of course, how significant it is in terms of the impact it can have in people's lives and the role it can play in people's lives. So the New Psychotherapist magazine coming through, I really like, lots of interesting articles. And again, it's being part of a wider body, part of a wider community. I like those things, working in private practice. I'm looking for ways, I suppose, to also feel part of something bigger. When you come out of a training institution where you are part of something bigger, part of a community. I then worked at CCP and saw clients from there, but now I see clients entirely at home. So it's also nice to be part of that bigger thing, having a sense of that. From a very personal point of view, UKCP, people at UKCP have been really supportive, as well as an organisation. To me personally, have been really, really helpful in supporting me through and growing this journey into the sort of media work as well.
Yeah, it's great to hear, and we always like working with members and being able to provide that support, so it's good to hear. And now good to ask you a few questions about training, so ask you to think back and reflecting now, is there anything you wish you knew before you entered into psychotherapeutic training?
Yeah, I think I would say I did, probably part way through the course, a couple of years in, maybe get a bit disillusioned in terms of what I was learning, because some things really touched me, resonated with me, and I've absolutely used and still do with clients. One thing that I would absolutely say is really the training, incredibly helpful things on it that, as I say, were absolutely necessary and I would still use now. It really is a gateway in some ways into being able to, as well, find your own voice. I would encourage people not to be put off perhaps by the more academic aspects of it, that once you qualify, you can really find your voice and what touches you and the things that you love and that you think help you and that you believe are going to help other people, and go out to the world with that.
And what advice would you give to someone considering training?
I think from a practical point of view, there is the cost of it. And as I say, depending on what you want to do afterwards, transitioning to private practice, there is that income side of things and making sure that's held in mind. As far as considering doing the training, I would, suggest go for that course content, that detail of the course that really feels like it's something that you're interested in. If you're looking at setting up private practice and those things, there can be a tendency, I think, how do I please enough people kind of thing for people to come in as clients. But what I would say is that, that's quite an outward in way of looking at things, that I just think if you go to do the training that you enjoy, read around the subject, see what touches you, see what resonates with you, and then pursue that. But it's a constant journey in terms of learning new things as well. And, we do continuing professional development, which is, of course, a requirement, but it also means hearing lots of different views, things like compassion focused therapy, I didn't look at until after I'd qualified. So it's an ongoing journey, as I say, which is, I think, a wonderful thing about the career.
How did the training change you, do you think?
Well, in all sorts of ways, I would say. I think I'm braver than I was before. So the process of the training, some group therapy, we had lots of experiential weekends at CCPE. So there was 2 days in a room with, a group of other 5 or 6 people talking about images that we'd produced from visualizations and those kind of things. It really helped with my relationships with other people. So it built my trust of other people. And of course, I was able to know myself better. So I was able to trust myself better as well. Talking to other people again over the course, that the communication of things was helped, I think. And when your psychological and emotional well-being improves, I think that has an impact on your physical well-being, on what I'm like as a dad, on what I'm like as a husband, as a friend, all those things. And again, I'm not holding out anything in terms of perfect at all, of course not, but it is enhanced my life. Not only do I do something that I love on a day-to-day basis and get paid to do that, but it's absolutely, in very important ways changed how I relate to myself and other people, which has hugely improved my quality of life.
That's amazing. And your previous point before about continuing to develop is, I think, such an important aspect to that as well. And it sounds like you're continuing to find all of these opportunities and the joy in your career as well.
Yeah, completely. It's a very exciting career, I think, because also, everything that I would learn that was new, it personally helps me. It personally helps my clients and my family and my relationships with other people outside of work. So, I couldn't imagine anything I would want to do more.
That was UKCP psychotherapist John Paul Davies speaking to Helen Willingham, our Head of Content and Engagement. If you're interested in exploring training, then you can visit our psychotherapy training page, where you can find information on psychotherapy as a career, as well as the different training pathways available to you. Just go to www.psychotherapy.org.uk/psychotherapy-training. All episodes of My Psychotherapy Career are available on our website, psychotherapy.org.uk. You can also subscribe to our channel, UKCP, on your favourite streaming platform. Do you have feedback you'd like to share with us on this episode, or any from our series? Get in touch with us at communications@ukcp.org.uk. Join us again next month. Till then, thank you for listening and take good care of yourselves.